Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. We'll have a little bit of a rolling start, so if anyone is still trickling in, you'll hopefully be able to catch the most of it here at the beginning. Okay, so this webinar is Revit 2026 and foreground. We're actually going to be looking a little bit at 2025 as well. But in case anyone doesn't know who I am or who Parallax is, just a quick introduction that Parallax team, we are a practice technology consultancy, which I always say is a fancy way of saying we are a Revit consultancy. We specialize in all things Revit. We are a five-person distributed office. So Aaron, our director, which some of you may know him as well, he is based out of Dallas. I am in the Seattle area, and we are kind of scattered around. You can find us online at a few different spots. But for what we will cover today, we're going to cover, like I said, we're going to cover Revit 2025 briefly. Revit 2026 Topo Solid is what we're mainly going to focus on. So we're going to look at excavate, we're going to look at subdivision types, we're going to look at recess subdivisions and a couple other things that are different in 26. And then we're also going to look at the foreground Topo Solid updates and workflows um, that we've added recently that will help with some of these changes. If you have any questions as we're going, you can drop them in the Q&A. I'm hoping to leave a bit of time at the end to kind of have a bigger Q&A block, but if you think of something, feel free to drop it. If I see it and it's relevant, I'll try to kind of pick questions up as we go, but we'll see how it goes. And before we get started, I'm going to do a quick shameless plug. A lot of you probably already know about our planting library, and Parallax in general has a lot of content libraries. We have a few other landscape libraries than just these two, including site furniture and scalable boulders. But our newest landscape library, some of you might not know about, so I figured I would share it briefly. And it's one that anyone who has done planting plans and Revit will appreciate. Generally, getting nice differentiated planting patterns in Revit is always a bit of a challenge. There's a few reasons for that, partly because patterns aren't easily rotated in Revit. So if you're coming from AutoCAD to Revit and you're used to rotating your patterns, you suddenly can't do that. And also, a lot of the patterns in Revit are very generic or kind of architectural. So past year or so, I've been developing this planting pattern set. So it features 30. I actually need to update this description. It features 30 unique one-of-a-kind patterns that I've custom built, and they're designed specifically for planting plant areas, so planting area plants. So they have a range of textures and densities. They all generally look nice together, and they all have descriptive names, which you can see here on the right side, that match the pattern they represent. So if you're interested, there's a QR code. You can take a screenshot, take a picture, or of course, you can always just send me an email and we can, if we have a little time at the end, I might open up the file and we can look through it really quick if anyone wants to see it. But we will go ahead and just jump in and get over into Revit. Escape. So we'll be toggling back and forth between Revit 25 and Revit 26 with the same file, but we'll start out in 25. So if you've worked in 24 and 25, you should know the basics of what TopoSolid is and generally what it does. But I know that sometimes some people get stuck down a few versions, depending on the project. And so just to make sure we're all on the same page, I'll go ahead and do a quick high-level recap of the differences between floors and toposolids. I found that when I'm talking to sometimes to clients that it's useful to have this quick overview and to know like once you're in 24, you actually should be using toposolids instead of floors. So I'm going to jump over here. I already have a little side by side so we can compare. So we have a floor here and we have a toposolid here right next to it. So in general, floors and toposolids are very similar. They're both derived from the same base element. So for the most part, I recommend that once you're in 24 or later, that you just stop using floors and switch entirely to toposolids. There's three main reasons for this. The first, as you can see right away, is our topo solid has contours, our floors do not. So if you're doing anything with grading, softscapes, hardscape, topo solid is going to give you that visual contour feedback, which is very helpful. Um, Topo solids so that's the first big reason. The second big reason is that topo solids have subdivision. So I went ahead and dropped a subdivision on here. If you grab a topo solid, you'll see your subdivision is up here. So this is particularly important with the new subdivision functionality in 26. But subdivisions give you a lot of flexibility now, so you generally want to be using them. They're a little less flexible in 25. We'll talk about that. And then the third kind of big reason to use topo solids instead of floors is the split functionality. So I think a lot of people, this is an easy one to forget because it doesn't have a flashy new button, but it continues on 26 that topo solids can be split and floors cannot. So if I go up here on my modify ribbon, we have our split element, and you'll see I can't do anything with a floor, but I can split my topo solid. So it will enter into a split similar to when you split topo surfaces, and I can just draw a line across and I can split that, and you'll see it will also split your subdivisions along with it. So that was a really quick one, but the split will take a little bit longer on really large topo solids, but that is a powerful tool that floors just don't have. There's other reasons to use and to switch to the topo solids, including basically increased stability and performance. So especially with large and complex elements, if you're grading anything, you generally want to be using topo solids. But the real draw is the additional features that topo solids have. Okay, so let's go back over here. So in 25, the main tool that was added to topo solid was excavate. So it's just like with subdivision, my mouse is getting a little happy here. So just like with subdivision, you'll see that we access excavate by selecting the topo solid that we want to excavate. Um, and so you'll see it up here on modify excavate and remove excavator both up here. I personally don't love that this tool is confined up here to the contextual modify ribbon. So we've also added it to foreground as well. And I've made excavate a little bit more powerful. So we'll look at that. We're going to look at out of the box stuff here first, and then we'll come back and look at foreground stuff. So excavate can be used in sort of two different ways. It can be used as a replacement for building pad element and functionality. So the building pad died with topo surface in 2024 when 24 came out, but there wasn't really a replacement, or at least a direct easy replacement until 25. So we'll go ahead and jump over here. So this is actually a floor. I have a couple floors here. I'm gonna hide this guy. Oh, I've already excavated, shoot. All right, so we'll go ahead and unexcavate this so I can show it again. Oh, I excavated. That's the problem with sample files. You forget what you've done to it already. So I'm going to remove that really quick. All right, so I'm going to hide that again this time. So you'll see I haven't excavated anything now that I've removed that as an excavation. So I could actually I could use that building floor as an excavation tool, but most of the time you're not going to have a giant floor mass as you're building. So what you typically do and what you did with building pads is you put a pad down at basically the basement level. And you would often have, depending on the building, you'd often have different pads kind of stepped around at wherever your basement is stepping around. The nice thing about excavate is you can use floors or topos. So this is a good use case of where the floor is perfectly fine. And it might be preferable if you're not grading anything to just use a floor element. So again, we grab this guy, we hit excavate, and then we can excavate with essentially our building pad. So this is kind of the building pad use case that I think of. But what excavate does, it creates a void in your topo solid, and it attaches kind of the bottom of your topo solid to the bottom of whatever element that you use to excavate. Uh, so the other main way that you can use excavate, and it does the same functionality, but I think of it as sort of a different use case, is you can use excavate to essentially drape and then excavate your object. So I have a subdivision up here as a sidewalk. I'll go ahead and just delete this for now. And I'm gonna go ahead and actually drape this one that I have down here just to show what that looks like. So I'm going to use foreground to do this because drape is a foreground functionality. And you'll see in 25, we have this excavate slabs functionality added to drape. So I can pick my slab. It's going to try to find my host for me. Does that correctly. You can check my settings. These settings look correct. So as long as excavate is checked, it's going to try to excavate. The thing about excavation when you're running it with drape is that it does sometimes fail. It does work in this case because I've tested it. But I've seen plenty of examples where you can run drape with excavate and the drape will work, but then the excavate will fail at the end. And it will just ask you, it will give you the typical cut join error and it will just fail to cut. So that's Revit for you. Whenever you start getting into geometry cutting and joining, particularly with complex shapes, you're going to get some failure, unfortunately. So you can see this guy is excavated there, and I can actually test that as well with this foreground tool. I can find my excavations, and it's going to select them for me. I can see that that one is being excavated. So yeah, like I said, a few things to know about excavate is it does have stability issues. That this is something the dev team has worked on over the past few years, and I believe in 26 they've introduced some features to try to reduce join errors. I think they still do happen in 26, but they're trying to kind of push down the frequency that we're seeing those. And then the other thing is it only works in the cutting direction. So it's not a true building pad replacement. It doesn't do anything. There's no like fill option. It's kind of similar to the fact that we have a split functionality, but we don't have a join functionality for our topo solids. We have an excavate functionality, but we don't have a fill functionality exactly. It would be useful to have that, so we'll see. So in summary, excavate was the main change that we saw in 2025 with our topo solids. The other thing that we did add in foreground, I'll point out before we switch over to 26, is that we added this topo solid button. So if you're in 24, you actually won't see this topo solid. This topo solid button will just activate the topo solid tool, the same as if you're on the massing and site ribbon. And you click this. It wasn't available to us in 2024. It was an API change with postable commands. So the rest of the tools are the same, but we added this as a convenience so that you don't have to toggle between massing and site if you're working with your topo solids in 25 and newer. Okay, so I'm gonna hop over. Oh yeah, Anna has a question about once topo solid is split, you can assign different types. Yes, you can. So once you split it, you can become different. So the split functionality is one that's even one I forget about because I'm not actually in 25 all the time, day to day. But it is very powerful. It basically allows you to split a topo solid and maintain the shape and the geometry of that topo solid in a less destructive manner than shape editing or than boundary editing and then having to shape edit afterwards. So it's a good thing to really remember that you have in your toolbox with topo solid is that split. And you can do all sorts of like crazy splits. You can do like donut splits. I've tested it out a little bit, but it's one of those tools that it's always better when the dev team comes up with a tool like that because they'll generally make it much more powerful than I could ever do that. Okay, so we answered that. All right, we're gonna move on to 26. So I have the same project. I already went ahead and upgraded this project. Doesn't take very long because it's a very small project, but that way we don't have to sit here and watch it upgrade live. I also have added a subdivision schedule so that we can look at that without making a schedule live as well. So in 26, we have more changes and more improvements to our topo solid. Um, most of these changes are going to be based, and we're going to see them with our subdivision. Um, so actually, I'm going to switch back to 25 really quick. So in 25, our subdivisions, just so we can look at the differences here between our subdivisions. So I'm going to grab, and any of, actually that's not a subdivision anymore. These are all subdivisions. So in 25, our subdivisions are instance-based. They have 3 instance parameters. They have the material, the subdivide height, and the inherit contours or not. So I have it unchecked in all of these. So they're all instance parameters. There's no types. And 26, our subdivisions are now type-based. So that's a big change. So you'll see that when you upgrade a project, and this one was upgraded, all existing subdivisions are going to convert on the fly to being type-based, which is interesting and a little messy. So if I grab any of these that were upgraded, you'll see that the naming convention here that we have is it basically is going to take our material, it's going to put our material name, and then it's going to put our height together. So you can see like these are the same material, but because I gave them 2 different heights, they are actually 2 different types. This one was 1 inches, had a 1-inch height, 1-inch offset, and this one had the 6 inches. So when you first upgrade a project from 25 and you're using subdivisions, you're going to need to do some type cleanup right away. It shouldn't be too complicated. You should be able to either make a schedule or go down to your types and your families and basically grab your types, remap them however you need to. But because of that change, there is going to be cleanup on upgrade. I actually made a quick subdivision schedule so we can actually see that here. So I could quickly grab, like if I wanted all of my planting to actually be the same type, which in this case I probably wouldn't because they're different heights, but if I wanted all of my concrete, I could quickly grab it all. I could remap it to my concrete type. Um, and then you'll also see it's going to maintain whatever offsets we have. So these are all going to be the same. When you make a new subdivision in 26, the defaults are different than they were previously. So we're going to look at that. I'm going to go ahead and make a subdivision using this roadway. I'm not going to drape it, but I'm going to use this as an outline. So just to recap, I'm going to grab my base topo solid. I'm going to subdivide it. I'm going to use my asphalt. And then I'm going to use my pick lines. I'm going to tab select my road outline. That's why I made that as a quick method to get that on there. There we go. And you'll see now when you make a new subdivision, the default height or offset now is always going to be 0. So this is the other big change. We have subdivision types and we have recessed subdivisions with 0 being our new default. Which is generally kind of, I think, the way, particularly if you're like an early concept, if you have architects using subdivisions, this is how architects are going to want to use subdivisions. This is the way the old subregions worked, is that they were always kind of hosted in plane with your base topo. So that is how that guy works. The other thing that is worth knowing is, so as we're going to talk about excavate a little bit more, but whenever you make a subdivision, the default also is it excavates it. So with foreground now, we have our find excavations. So I can quickly, I already kind of showed this once, but I'm going to show it again. I can quickly grab all the excavations. And you'll see that this building, because I upgraded it when it was still excavated, is excavating as well. But you'll see that all of these subdivisions, which are also topo solids, are being excavated. Even if they're offset up, On upgrade, basically, Revit has decided that the default is subdivisions are always excavating, which I'm not entirely sure I agree with, but that is a difference from 25 where they couldn't excavate. So if I go back to 25 and I find all my excavations just as a point of comparison, you'll see that none of these ones are actually excavating. None of these planting ones that are up are excavating. So that is an interesting thing about the excavation feature as on upgrade. Even things that sit on top of your topo solid are technically, they can be excavated even if they're not cutting. So cutting and excavation are actually two different pieces. They can work together. So an excavation that is at 0 will cut. So if I push this, if this gets pushed down to 0, it is going to be cutting. And you'll see that. You'll see that if I isolate this, if I isolate this element, you'll see now where it's that it is excavating. So I can undo that. If I don't back up, just back up out of that. If I don't want all of these to be excavated, you can remove them as from the excavation. So that is where we get into our excavate tools. Um, the out of the box tools aren't super convenient because you have to do it one at a time. So if I want to remove these excavations, I have to go through and like click one at a time to do them. So foreground excavations and unexcavate or remove excavation is a bit more convenient. So if I go over here, just show these really quick. So if I excavate, I can grab my base and then I can quickly just grab however many things I want to excavate and I can do them all at once. The same is true if I want to unexcavate. So if I want to remove these from my excavation, I can grab that base and then I can grab all of these guys. Oh, these ones aren't interesting. And then I can finish that as well. Yeah, there's a couple of things with 26 that we'll probably still have to continue testing. Since it seems like it's counting these as excavations, and I don't think I was expecting that. Okay. Let's see, 0, yep. Okay, and then a couple other changes. So I kind of talked about this a little. I mentioned that for subdivisions, I made a different subdivision schedule. So this is because in 26, subdivisions are now on their own subcategory. And you'll see this kind of everywhere. So if you go into your visibility graphic overrides, if I go down to my topo solids, we'll see our subdivisions are here. So if I turn them off, you'll see they will all turn off together. This is convenient in some places and less convenient in other places. You also see it in your view filters. So if I go into my filters, if I make a new one, subdivisions, I go down to topo solids, we'll see that subdivision is its own as well. Where this is a little less convenient is for it also shows up in our schedules. So if I have just a straight topo solid schedule, suddenly your subdivisions are not going to be in here. So even if you have a schedule that's upgraded from 25 that had subdivisions in it, they're going to get yanked out in 26. I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about that, other than you do have to basically make a subdivision schedule to get all your subdivisions. So you'll see the difference here. If I pull these up down here, I can show what this looks like. So if I grab all of these guys, you'll see that there are subdivisions. If I grab these ones, you'll see that these are our base ones that we're working with that are outside and not subdivisions. This really will only matter if you're using topo solid schedules for for takeoffs, like areas and square footages, because I think that's the main limitation. If you're using like multi-category schedules, you're still going to see your subdivisions and your topo solids together, and the multi-category schedule just the same as any other element. I would say the main thing it impacts is if if you have topo solid schedules that you were getting takeoffs from. All right, close that down. And then the last thing that was added in 26 is the ability to copy points. So this is a feature that we had with Topo Surface, and it was killed when the Topo Surface was killed, and now it's been brought back with Topo Solid. So I will admit that I did miss copy points. It's one of those things that you don't realize how much you use it until you can't use it anymore. So for me, it's a welcome addition. So I'm going to grab my base, Topo Solid. If I go into modify sub elements, I'm gonna go ahead. You can actually also copy split lines as well, so we'll show it with a split line. So I can add a line at 440, which I think, yeah, is approximately the elevation we're at here. So if I have a 440 split line, I can grab that split line and the 2 points, and you can see now if you're in an earlier version, copy is not an option. I believe you can use, yeah, can use your CO because that's the same command. And I can copy that over, and it's going to copy my points and my split line all together, which is convenient. Uh, um, yeah, and Adam had a question that I missed a while ago about remerging topo solids after splitting. I think I did cover that, and that no, we do not have a functionality in out-of-the-box Revit to remerge. We do have a foreground functionality, but I will say the boolean and merge are tricky tools that often they don't work, which I think is part of why that the dev team hasn't added it back. It is very difficult to do. Okay, so we will move on to foreground. So I did already show the excavate tools, um, but just to recap them, the difference here that we have between the foreground excavate tools and if you access foreground or if you access excavate from your modify ribbon is that this is just a single, you can only do a single click. So if you're doing excavate or unexcavate, you can only do a single click. This allows you to select multiple and excavate them all at once and remove multiple at once. Find excavation is also just a convenience for clarifying what is being excavated. And it looks like I will need to modify the remove excavation because it looks like I think it was built in 25 and I didn't fully test it in 26 with subdivisions. Um, but anyways, I'll need to double check on those. But I should be able to select all of my subdivisions, and that's not working. Anyway, okay, so those are kind of all related, so we have them all stacked together. The other new feature that we've added that also is not available, so all of these features are only available in 25 and newer. Excavate should be obvious, and that it was only available 25 and newer. Set contours is also, we only have the API functionality was only added in 25. So while we do have contours, it is not available in 24 for that reason. So if you're in 24, unfortunately, you don't have any of these tools yet, but let's look at what set contours does. So if you're familiar with contours, which I'll do a quick recap of our contours here. So I'm going to grab my topo base type. So contours are all are all controlled by type, which is something that I don't really love because adjusting contours by type is kind of can be a pain in the ass, especially if you have like multiple soil types that all have contour lines. If you want to turn your contours on and off between all of your pavement, doing it by type is a little bit of a headache, which is why I made a tool to help with that. But if I go into my contour display, you'll see that these are the contours. These are kind of the default contours that you have I believe in an imperial file, so yeah, they start at -100, they go to 1,000. You can adjust them if you are working at higher elevations and you need them to go up higher. But we have our 5-foot primary and our 1-foot secondary, which is what we generally expect to see. But you can add any custom ones that you want to add as well. So if I want to add my contour lines to my roadway, I can do that using set contours. So I could go in and I could add them manually, but it's much faster to use this tool. So there's 2 different methods that you can use to set your contour lines. You can match all, which will get all of them even if they aren't visible, or I can choose to only match the visible ones. So match visible is going to look for that check mark, and if the check mark is checked, it will add it. If it's not, it won't. We'll just add all. And I want to use my topo base, and I want to add it. I could add it to like all of my pavement at once. So I could go through here and I could check all of these. I could add it to all of them if I wanted to. I'm just going to add these at once. So then I can run that, and then you'll see now I have my contour lines turned on my roadway or my asphalt here. Um, if you're paying attention, you'll actually notice that it doesn't add them to our concrete. And I think this is a bug with upgraded topo or subdivisions. I haven't tested it extensively. Um, but I noticed it when I was testing this file that it actually, let me offset this, or this guy actually doesn't offset. Let me change this. Let me change both of these types. So let me change it. So this is the one that I added it to. And I'm going to offset them both up 6 inches so we can clearly see them above. Yeah, so you'll see that these ones don't have any contours. But I believe if I make a new subdivision, that we will see the contours. It's basically a bug. So let's just test that out really quick. Um, so yeah, there's a few funny things that happen on upgrade, and this is potentially one of them. To grab this concrete, splay it out over here. Yeah, so you can see I do have contours, and they are here, and this is excavated. These ones which were upgraded do not, which is a little strange, but there's some funny things that have to happen on upgrade. But maybe it's something that the dev can resolve, so we'll see. Okay, so that is excavate, set contours. So one thing I will point out about excavate is that just because you can cut and excavate all your topo solids now and all of your subdivisions doesn't necessarily mean you should. And sometimes you can't. So you're definitely going to have instances where your subdivisions will fail. I was testing this one. I think when I recreated it with new to get the contour lines, it failed. And you will also see basically when you when you do lots of cutting and joining actions, particularly on a really big and complex topo solid, it can seriously impact your performance. So I would say use your excavations with caution and cutting in general with caution, particularly with large and more complex topo solids. And it's also good to be aware that when you're subdividing, it is going to be excavating it from your base. So if you do start to see performance issues, that also could be a reason. Okay, so we set our contours there already. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and just show a couple of things with our subdivision tools, and then we'll open it up to questions in the last 15 minutes or so. This is not a newer tool, but I thought it is worth pointing out now that subdivisions are a bit more powerful in 2026, is that I think this was added in 2024, if I'm remembering correctly, when it was basically added when subdivisions were added. And it allows you to initiate and create a subdivision from an area or a room element. So if you're familiar with the way I've worked or with the way I've taught landscape architects to work in Revit is that we will often use rooms or areas for planting areas because they allow you to have an element that you don't have to edit the boundary. And you can do, particularly if you ever have planting plans with these fun organic shapes, which some landscape architects love to do, it's much easier to do it if you're not making a boundary every time, if you're just actually using our boundary lines. And yeah, you can see these actually behave slightly better when they overlap slightly. Um, yeah, rooms in particular are a little extra funky. So I've already created a few subdivisions, but if I want to keep creating my subdivisions through here, I'm gonna go ahead and grab, um, I can actually pre-select these. So the tool is set up to work with a pre-selection, but you don't have to do a pre-selection. Um, so if I do a pre-selection, yeah, you'll see it grabs those 6 areas or rooms. I can then go out. If I decide I don't want those, I could go change them. And then it's going to try to grab my host, just like all other foreground tools are. And then this is a tool that hasn't fully been updated with 26 functionality. You can see it's starting to get scaffolded, but we're gonna add offset and type in here as well, but it hasn't been fully added yet because this tool was created in 24. So currently it's going to use the 26 default, so it's going to do a 0, and it's going to specify whatever height or whatever type we last used. But I can quickly adjust these as needed for my planting. So if I want them to all be 1 foot, the 1 foot offset, I have actual 3D planting areas. And the most powerful thing about this tool isn't this, it's the fact that they will update as well. So if this boundary changes, so you can see the idea behind this is very much in line with how we do planting. So if any of these, yeah, and you can see there's something weird happening with this one, we're going to ignore that for now. But if these boundary lines are moving around a little bit because, my designer has decided these planting beds are not quite right and we need to adjust them, I can adjust these all really quickly without having to edit each boundary. And then I can do a quick update all, and it's going to check all of my subdivisions and update them for me so that I quickly have that 3D representation. If you're doing walkthroughs or whatever, if you need to see your planting beds, subdivision is a great way to do that. And this tool kind of facilitates that much faster. Um, and then one other thing that I will point out, though I was testing it and I wasn't actually able to get it to respond, so I'm actually not sure why that is, if things have changed in 25 and 26, but there's a couple different app settings that I will point out that were added. I think they were added sort of late last year. Um, we have some UI warnings that these are turned off. These are not enabled by default, but these are kind of two little helper methods. So if you're finding you're having a lot of slab overlap warnings, you can check this box and that will basically suppress slab overlap warnings. I personally find slab overlap warnings to be a little obnoxious with the introduction of topo solids because kind of everything is often overlapping to a certain degree now. But different users might have different opinions on that, so you don't necessarily have to use it. It's because I think, yeah, with topo solids, it just changes how our slabs are overlapping all the time. So this will disable floors, topo solid, and subdivision overlap warnings. Though I'm not having them in this file, so I'm not sure why that is. And this other one is actually really useful for anyone who's using Revit. If you're ever editing type parameters in a schedule and you want to disable the type warning that happens whenever you edit a type. This will also, I personally like, if you're working on like planting schedules and you're editing your plants, which are almost always type parameters from your schedule. I think I created this tool when I was doing that one day and it was driving me crazy. So this will also suppress that warning as well if you have that checked. It is currently Revit specific, so that's one thing. If you're moving between different versions of Revit and you're seeing warnings, you might need to check. your version to see what your settings are per version. But I'll go ahead and we have about 15 minutes left, so I'll go ahead and open it up to any questions that anyone has about, happy to answer questions about Revit, 25, 26, Topo Solids, or foreground, if there are any. No, no questions. Okay, Jesse has a good question. So yeah, what are you doing when you want to model a fill situation? Um, what you can do and what I have done, I'm not sure if I've actually done it or I've just done it in theory, is that you can basically you can model it with a topo solid below it. So I can show what we need to have. I'll just show here with this little guy. So let's bring this up to 4. This is going to be like a tiny example, but it should serve its purpose. Um, so what I can do is I can essentially, I'll do this in plan. So whenever, oh, those are little cattywampus, aren't they? That's what happens when you sketch in 3D sometimes. So I'm going to copy this. And again, whenever you copy and paste, you want to do that in plan. So you can do align to current view or align to same place. Um, and I'm going to grab, essentially I need some soil that I know is going to be deep enough to be my fill. I could use any of these. In this case, I could also probably use my 48-inch soil, and that will cover me. Oh, let's see, but maybe it's a different color, so I'll use this one even though. So you can see what will happen if it goes down that far. And then I can knock this down 6 inches. So I can knock it down 6 inches here. I can use foreground to adjust my points, all 6 inches. 6 inches, right? I'm actually not even sure. I think I think it might be 8 inches. Yeah, okay. So we'll do 8 inches down, and you'll see now that this is down here. So you can also, if you want to, you can join it, but again, like I said, you want to be careful with using join because it it just can create some performance lag. But if I'm just joining this small guy, it's really not going to impact this big guy because this one is the one that's really doing the work of the cut and join. But you can see it does create two different pieces, but it does if you're kind of running that back into your topo, that can be useful. Yeah, so foreground windows, if you're having problems with your windows, it's possible that it can happen where they occasionally get hidden off screen. Um, it's a typical Windows problem that you can have. I actually had it recently because I was reconfiguring my Windows. So we're always happy to troubleshoot that if it's usually user specific and not version specific. So that is usually an indication that it's a window issue, but we can always check on that offline. Um, and with subdivisions, have you had any issues where the work set doesn't match the work set of the topo solid itself? Oh, yeah, so that is the other thing that I didn't mention that was introduced in 26. Um, that you can now have different phasing as well. So I forgot about that entirely. I think I can set this to exist because that's before this one was created, or maybe I can. Um, yeah, okay, there you go. So yes, you can I believe that was introduced in 26. So that was under all of the subdivisions. Um, yeah, I think all the subdivision changes are in 26. So I believe the phasing change was also introduced in 26. I think it's more useful for existing. So if you have an existing elements that you want that are kind of hosted on your base, because of the way phasing in topo solids and topo surfaces has always been very bizarre and not like other Revit elements. So usually when you have a base topo, it's not just existing and it's not just proposed. You kind of have this existing and proposed thing that's hybrid together. That may start to change if we see continued development with this phasing. So I don't know what will happen in the future. But currently, yeah, that is a big di difference that we're seeing now, and that a big difference from what subregion was and what subdivision was previously allowed to be, is that they can have different phasing. And so your question was on work set. So I believe the work set is also, this is not a work shared file, so I cannot demonstrate it. But I believe they also can be separate work sets as well. I'm not sure about with 25. The one thing I will say that we have seen is that you can get weird phasing issues, I think in 25. I'm not sure about in 26 as well, with overlapping topo solids. So that is one thing to be careful about with phasing between different topo solids. I haven't seen it with subdivisions, but I've seen it with phasing between like a big existing topo solid and a big proposed topo solid. Um, but there are sometimes processing issues between those. And yeah, so yeah, we should look at that Windows issue. Um, Jake, to see what the root cause of that is. Um, all right, since we have a couple minutes, I'll go ahead and just open up our little planning patterns file. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to ask. I feel like people are always interested in seeing these sort of things. So yeah, like I said, there's 30 patterns there, and we actually include the 5 that are in the Parallax landscape template as well, that are sort of our base patterns, but you can see that they do have a wide range of um, appearances and densities so that they kind of all, the idea is that they all work nicely together. And just like with all of our, my mouse and Zoom are being a little funny, but just like with all of our libraries, it will likely grow over time. So it used to be 25 and now it's 30. Um, you can see that they all look like. But I made them all myself as I've been working on some planting projects over the past year, and I had some really big and complex planting areas, so I needed some more patterns. So that is where they come from. All right. I guess if there aren't any more questions, thank you all for attending. I will be sending out in a couple days, I think before the end of the week, we'll send out a link where you can download the video, and I need to chat with Erin. We'll probably get it up on YouTube as well, um, so that you can share it a little bit more easier. And yeah, there is no update with the patterns, unfortunately. So yeah, everyone always asks me that. Pattern warping is one of those things that's hard coded into Revit, and we do not have any sort of out of the box solution for that at the moment. I don't know, it's one of those things that when the dev team was working on the 24 and Topo Solids, we tried to kind of solve it at the beginning, and it didn't work for whatever reason. So it hasn't made any progress since they introduced kind of like the 3D alignment, which is not a true fix for the problem. So it persists, fortunately. I think, I don't know, if it was ever to be truly solved, we would need to see some sort of introduction of like a true plan pattern and versus a true, but that hasn't happened. So we have a tool set to assist with that, but yeah, it is basically just automating a workaround that we continue to have to use. That is one of the reasons why we also use rooms or areas for planting, is that the pattern is flat regardless in that sort of element. So it facilitates that workflow, even if you do want to show them in 3D. The pattern in itself can still be flat if you're using a room or an area to represent it. Okay. All right. If there aren't any more questions, we'll go ahead and maybe we'll wrap this up. Let's see. So thank you, everyone. And if you have any questions, oh yeah, I've got a question of rooms versus areas. Okay. Yes. So rooms versus areas, I is one of those things that I started out using areas and have switched to using rooms. I will say rooms have their downsides over areas. The main downside to areas is that area plans don't are like not don't have full functionality in the Revit environment. So I have an area plan in this file just to show. Um, but the main thing is if you ever have like an enlargement plan, and if you ever have, um, so if I want to put a view reference to my area plan, um, that's not an option. So if you ever have an enlargement plan with like multiple sectors or multiple enlarged plans and you want to have view references to that planting plan with areas, like it's just not possible, which just seems very bizarre to me, the area plans. The area plans are basically not really intended to be part of like true documentation. So that's the main downside to using area plans and why I've switched to using rooms. Rooms are actually like there in the model, which makes them a little bit weirder. They just behave a little bit weirder than areas. Um, but they're generally very similar other than that. So those are, yeah, I would say both elements have their downsides. But I have switched to using rooms just because of if I've worked on too many projects where we need view references to to our planting area plans. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.